Hi, Michael.
Hey, Gail, how are you? How are you?
Good. How are you?
Hanging in there. Hanging in there.
I'm feeling a little virtuous this evening because I got out to the weeds at 6:30 this morning before the heat and got chased in by the mosquitoes, but got done what I needed to get done to my satisfaction.
That's good. Yeah, it's a strategic thing dealing with the mosquitoes. You
When
got
I can
time.
see weeds from my breakfast table, I gotta go get them. Just no way.
Are you a big gardener? Gail, are you a big gardener?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Big time.
Yeah. I know your video's off.
How come my video? That's a very good question. I will change that.
Hey,
Hi,
Graham.
Graham. There I am.
There you are. So what's the total today, by the way?
139.
Wow, that's really impressive.
That's 16.47% return of households.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, I'm really tickled.
Much better than the industry average.
Yes, yeah. And we're getting some really very interesting responses. That open-ended question at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Some very interesting suggestions.
Graham, you don't have to raise your hand. We're not meeting yet. Your hand's up.
And you're muted. You've mixed your hand in your mouth.
He's really signing. There we go.
Yeah, okay, lower hand. Yeah. Okay, here we go.
There we go.
Were you going to say something or just wanted to?
No, I was trying to turn something else off on the screen.
It didn't work. So Gail, I made you a co-host because I'm assuming you're going to want to share stuff later.
Okay. In particular?
I don't know. Were you gonna? Well, maybe not. I was assuming you might have something from the survey that you wanted to show us, but if not, that's totally cool too.
I don't think so. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I can report numbers and
Yeah, that's good.
that's about all. Yeah.
Okay.
And
Nate.
ask about a deadline. I would like to have a conversation about that. Hi, Nate.
Hey, Nate.
You're muted. There you go.
Hello,
How are you doing?
doing all right. Good to be
Good.
here.
Yeah. Let's see. So we're missing Zoe. I know Miriam is likely not coming. So it's and Leslie. One, two,
I'm
three.
wondering if Marianne is having trouble getting in. She's had that little connecting to audio thing going for a while.
Yeah. I think that's probably the case. Fortunately, she doesn't have to be on for a little while. So there's Zoe.
So Graham, what's the yellow highlighting in the minutes you just sent out?
Oh yeah, that's because I opened it on my iPhone and I've been away all weekend and I opened. I didn't take out the yellow. The yellow is edit suggestions by Michael and
Okay.
yeah. So
And you didn't take out the part you wanted to take out.
No, I know, I didn't know. So
But we can request that
Yeah.
if you're looking at the same thing I'm looking at.
yeah.
We'll get there.
Yeah.
Hey, Zoe.
Hello, everybody.
How are
Hi,
you?
Zoe.
I am very good.
Good. Oh,
I'm so
Marianne
admiring
made
the
it.
beautiful ceiling in your room. That wood.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that.
That is
Yeah,
so pretty.
this is our CSA pickup room.
Very nice.
Yeah, it is nice.
Hi, Marianne.
Marianne, did you have trouble getting in?
Her sound is off, or she's
Now
muted, or
Now
both.
she's playing. There you go.
Are you talking to me? I'm sorry, it's just
Yes.
putting in the earbuds.
That's okay. You were saying you had trouble getting in?
No, I was just saying goodbye to my niece.
Ah. Let's see. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 of us. So I think Leslie's the only one we're missing. Then we'll give her a minute. or two.
Miriam,
Miriam is not going to come.
she in Boston, yeah.
Yeah. Rob is having a hard time, so I think she's understandably prioritizing that. Is that a rooster?
Oh, is that my?
I don't know. I heard a rooster somewhere.
Not my rooster.
I don't think it's a rooster. I think it's just that sounds from downstairs as they're getting packed up. I'm at a cabin in the Adirondacks, so there's some people returning a day late from Memorial Day weekend.
Got it. Well, why don't we start? Because I think Leslie can pop in. Hopefully, she'll be here by the time we get to the minutes, but I'll call it. So let's see. Leslie's taking minutes. That's
Aha.
problematic. So,
No,
We'll be
that's
waiting.
going to be tricky.
yeah. I'll start.
She'll have to look at the recording at this rate.
Yeah. Well, I'll call us to order at 7:03. And so just confirming Leslie's the minute taker. And what I suggested and Zoe agreed to was, given that Miriam's dealing with personal stuff, that she's supposed to be next in line as we do our sort of circle. So Miriam was grateful that I gave her a pass on this one, and Zoe said she would do it next meeting. So thank you, Zoe, for that. And,
Yes.
so we'll do round 2 of our circle minute taking. So our whopping public, at some point we'll have a public coming to our meetings, but none quite yet. So
We have a couple times already. Henry's been here.
yeah, Henry's sort of in that gray
He's
zone.
public.
Like, he is public. Yeah. And, so Mary Ann, since you're the only public, do you have any comment?
I'm excited to be here, excited for what this committee is up to. I'm really glad that they're taking a more holistic approach to energy systems and thinking about that in terms of climate change and community resilience.
That was a great public comment. Thank you. So why don't we move on to minutes? We're doing good. So do I have a motion to approve the minutes of May 10th?
No.
2000? Well, yeah,
I would like to request a certain portion be deleted from the minutes.
oh, here's Leslie. Hold on a sec.
And can someone put the minutes in the chat, just so if it includes an agenda for this time? I couldn't open
you
an agenda.
Can you share it, Graham?
I have it.
I have
on-
it up. I could share it.
Yeah, that'll be the easy way. Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
No, yeah, that's a good way to do it.
Okay, so you can share now, and Leslie is in, I believe. Leslie, you're here, right?
Do you see the minutes?
Yeah.
I do.
yeah.
I
All
do.
right.
Thank you.
They look good.
So Graham, you say we just
Yeah,
disregard
ignore
the yellow?
the yellows. They were just away for.
Okay.
and-
So all of this is reporting, which I find very helpful and useful. And, the meeting before everybody had an assignment basically, and here they're reporting back in. And I understand Leslie's concern here about wanting to make these remarks about the presentation the week before. But I really think that this should not be contained in the minutes unless it be something like ECAC should take possible damage into consideration rather. Otherwise, this is a he said, she said, and I really don't want to get into that kind of thing in minutes, I think, or actually in the meeting either. But her point is a good one, that the possible damage or potential damage is something to consider when we look at any thinking about any installation. So if that could be reworked, Graham.
I totally agree. I didn't actually want to touch much of it at all, except to acknowledge what Leslie did find out, that some projects, you can get your house painted and it can go badly. I mean, it is a project management problem. It is not intrinsically
But that's someone's opinion. It's not.
And that was the other.
That's what gets.
That was the other problem I had with this, was that I actually had to start researching, and there's not much information out there. There's only one person who's actually published anything on the internet about Conway, and that is the same. That is the person who sent the op-ed to the recorder. And I have no doubt that there are problems, but it's impossible to evaluate what the problems might be. And it's not for us to, it's something for us to be aware if we do projects in the future, that we need them well designed, we need them well monitored as they're
Right.
installed. We need to do projects properly, and you don't pay for it until you've got what you had required. So it's a project problem.
Does this work?
Yes, whatever. Chopping it down works for me.
I would say, the only thing I would add, Gail, if you were to do that, is potential environmentally related installation damage, because I think you had said that, and that made sense.
Make it specific. Excellent.
Yeah. Does anyone else have thoughts about this they want to share? Nate, Zoe? And I don't know if Leslie is actually there, although she's connected. So.
Sorry,
Okay.
I am here. I didn't realize I was muted and video blank. But Nate, sorry, Nate and Zoe, do you want to say anything before I might say something?
Nope.
No.
Okay, Leslie, go for it.
Well, I hear the opposition, and I think at least this is now in the minutes, and that feels better to me than just ignoring it, because as I had said during the meeting, I had spoken to the woman who lives next to Devlin, who wrote the article, and it is not a good situation for the people living there. And no surprise that it's not reported. Lots of things don't get reported. But I'm satisfied that at least the potential environmental damage is taken into account, because Bob Armstrong, in my opinion, presented a utopia. And I know from Devlin's article and from hearing her speak, and my friend who lives next to Devlin, it was a disaster and still is not fixed. And I'm taking the minutes now, so I'll just let this be there. Yeah.
Great.
Oh, Gail, if you want to do it, that's fine.
Okay.
No, I was taking the minutes, but
Oh, okay, whatever.
but you should take over, because it's easier not to take minutes and do the meeting. So
Yeah.
if we're good with that, and I think, what's nice about this is it's in there, so that as we're considering options and things, that it's something we would take into account, just like it says. So I think, Gail, you could probably pull it down, but let's see.
I'm just wiping out yellows.
Yeah. So actually, we never had a motion to consider the motion, because you jumped in, Gail. So someone want to make a motion to,
Motion to approve the minutes.
approve the minutes, yes. Yeah, and the second?
A
I'd like to
second?
second that.
Okay, Zoe. So I'll do the roll call. So all in favor of approving the minutes? Graham,
Aye.
Gail,
Why?
Nate,
Aye.
Aye.
Leslie,
Aye.
Michael, aye, okay. unanimously approved. So we can move to the presentation that Mary Ann's going to give us on community solar. And Mary Ann, thank you for taking the time and sharing your knowledge with us. And you can share the screen. So if there's anything you want to share with us, because I think someone said Gail sent the PowerPoint on your behalf or something. But
Yeah, do you want me to bring it up?
if you, yeah, unless, I think that would probably be easiest, unless Gail, do you have it? If you wanted to
I can bring it up. That
Okay,
way I have
control.
Yes. Hold on, let me just find it. Sorry.
That's all right.
It is. Okay. Slideshow from beginning. You all can see that?
Yep.
Okay, so Co-op Power is a regional network of community energy cooperatives throughout New England and New York that is focused on a community-led, community-owned solar development. So we seek to do community development at the same time that we're doing solar development. The idea of a community energy cooperative, like the purpose of most cooperatives, is to realize economic, cultural, and social needs of the cooperative's members and their surrounding community. They have kind of baked into their DNA a strong commitment to community empowerment, resilience, and keeping wealth within the cooperative and within the community. Co-op Power's mission of late has been thinking about community solar development in a way that develops, finances, and supports community ownership of renewable energy generation as a regenerative source of community development. In other words, a lot of the kind of gold rush mentality that's been happening, we've been seeing in Massachusetts and New York now that there are good solar incentives. Co-op Power's question has been, how do we keep the money generated from that solar generation in the community so that it can lead to the financing of other renewable energy projects, or wherever the local community decides that it wants to apply that money to community development. So the local community energy cooperative idea is that the community criteria determines the solar development we do. So it's a very bottom-up approach to how we do solar development. And then before I go to that slide, and then what Co-op Power does as a kind of head office is aggregate the aspects of education, learning, legal, insurance, all of the things that when you aggregate them together in the various solar projects that we're doing, helps to reduce costs and support the local community energy co-ops through that process. Yes, Gail, you have a hand?
Yes, Mary Ann, are these co-ops formal entities? Or do you speak of cooperative as simply a group?
Well, they are formal entities. So yes, so
okay.
with each CEC, they have their own president, secretary, treasurer,
Okay.
and they track what they're doing. But actually, they're not there. We are kind of combined in terms of financing. So a lot of our accounting happens at the common office, and every project we develop is its own LLC, if that makes sense. that just.
But
just
but a
further
cooperative
highlight-
could be formed at a community level.
Correct.
Okay,
Right, like right now we've been kind of combining them. So we have like a Hampshire County, we've been doing it by county in Western Mass, like a Hampshire County CEC, a Franklin County CEC, a Hampden County CEC right now. This is just a bit of a sidebar. I don't know if you all know that we're 75% owner of the Northeast Biodiesel plant in Greenfield, which is just beginning operation, and they are a worker-owned cooperative that we formed, and they're taking used cooking oil and processing it into a fuel for home heating, diesel trucks, ships,
Wow.
and planes. So anything as a transition fuel for anything that's very difficult to electrify. So that's been a long-term labor of love that's actually getting up and running. So I wanted to share that since you're nearby.
cool.
Now, I don't know how much you know. I mean, I don't know who's been presenting to you, and I don't come into this with a lot of context. But generally, when I'm talking to people, the word community solar gets thrown around.
Yeah.
And really, all that community solar means is that it is a way for households to join a single shared solar energy system and receive solar credits directly on their electric bills through the utility. So the big solar arrays that AMP is proposing, those are technically community solar, meaning that that's how they would work. They would have like one big array, and then it would generate it for a bunch of different off-takers. So community solar, that's all community solar means technically. It
Mary Ann,
doesn't
can I ask you a
necessarily.
question about
Yeah.
that? Because somewhere, I think it was in the email exchange. So AMP's selling it to the grid. So if you have an energy generator that sells it to the grid directly,
Not community.
it seems like it wouldn't be community, because then it's just a private entity getting commercial benefit from selling, and there's no households involved. They're just customers of the utility, right?
Correct, but that is called community solar. So, you know, one of the things that we say about at Co-op Power is, you know, there's a lot of people talking about doing community solar that is not considering the community at all, and none of the wealth goes to the community. A lot of times the liability and the environmental effects stay at the community, and the profit from all those solar incentives goes out of state, or, you know, potentially out of country with some of the multinationals that are coming in. So I just say beware of that term, because it's getting thrown around a lot, and most of it just means that it's a large array that's generating off-site. So it's like, if you just think about it in terms of residential solar versus community solar. Does that make sense?
Sort of, but we can go on.
Yeah, so community solar allows, what the good aspect of community solar is that it creates a situation potentially for people who generally have been excluded from solar development, people who rent, people who can't afford to put solar on their roof, or they don't have a good roof. This is a way to do solar in a way that creates a sense of environmental justice and inclusion for solar energy if it's done in that way.
And Marianne, is that because you get third-party subsidies or some sort of grants for poor people to do this? Is that how that works?
Well, let me tell you about our recent project on River Valley, the
Sure.
co-op, the East Hampton store.
Okay.
So this is a co-op power project. River Valley Co-op came to us. We love working with other cooperatives and so supporting the cooperative movement as well. They came to us. They really wanted to be as as net zero in their carbon use as possible. And that's challenging with food co-ops because they just use a lot of refrigeration and use a lot of energy. So they really pushed us to figure out a way to finance. They've got a solar array on the roof of the store and also this parking lot array. If you haven't seen it, I recommend you go take a look because it's so beautiful.
It is. Yeah.
And so between like half of the generation from the parking lot array and the rooftop serve the store. But River Valley Co-op kind of pushed us even further to say, how can we do community solar in a way that really serves the low income community around our store? So we're now taking solar subscriptions for Eversource customers, because this is, again, it feeds into the grid, right? It feeds into the Eversource utility, but there are incentives for you to find low-income households who can get this electricity at a 15%, and then we give them a 15% discount. So right now we're doing solar subscription, reaching out largely within environmental justice communities with Springfield and East Hampton are the ones we're kind of focused on at the moment. But we are subscribing at the moment. So if you know anybody in Western Mass who's an Eversource customer who's low income, so we're looking for those 100 people who often can't participate in solar and get this energy at a 15% discount. Gail.
Do you set the rates or are you stuck with Eversource's rates?
What we do is sign a power purchase agreement. So the way this kind of creates energy security for low income, or I mean anybody's, not all of our arrays are low income. So one of the benefits of these kind of arrays is you tie in the electric rate by signing a power purchase agreement over the next 25 years. So it also really allows communities to have a sense of, they generally are escalating slowly, but it doesn't have, like right now, the main markets are just like crazy. Like there's a couple food co-ops who we've been dealing with because they're afraid they're going to go bankrupt, just like their rates have shot up like 50%. So this is also a community benefit in terms of that you have a power purchase agreement and it doesn't vary as wildly. Leslie.
Thank you. So with the community solar through co-op power, is it generally a similar thing like the co-op where you're not taking down the forest, you're using existing cleared land? Or-
Yes. Yeah, so I mean, I did start out by saying we like try to, really we come in through the CEC, we educate the community on how energy systems work, our value of energy democracy, which is this idea of distributed ownership of energy assets and community resilience. Then we support them in coming up with community criteria. And we do have a certain things at the co-op power mission level that we built on built environment. We try to take out try to change the natural environment as little as possible, because we definitely need trees. Trees and forests are a carbon sink and they're essential to the climate change solution. So all of our projects right now are on built environment. We have one CEC in upstate New York who's exploring doing a brownfield, which means that would be on top of a landfill or land that's really not, is so degraded that it's not good for agricultural, or it's no longer a forest. So those are what part of our mission in terms of how we site solar. Does that answer the question, Leslie?
Yes, I appreciate that. that very much, because I think that might separate Co-op Power's mission from some of the other community solar projects that tend to take down the forest to supply solar to communities. And it looks like Co-op Power is basically supplying electricity to communities without deforestation.
Correct. You know, we would love to see solar on every church, every school, every community center, I mean, parking lots are expensive to do, so they're a little bit harder to finance, but ideally, they seem like a no-brainer because it keeps cars cool while it's generating solar. And if you look at the East Hampton store one, you'll see how we've tried to manage snow removal as well by this kind of W form that the Solar Design Associates came up with.
Right.
Graham, did you have a question?
I have a question, Marianne. Can you clarify the power purchase agreement? Who has a power agreement? Who has a power purchase agreement with who in the situation of the River Valley Co-op?
Okay, so in the River Valley Co-op, it'll be so there's a couple places of power purchase. So Co-op Power right now is the current owner of the array. So the power purchase agreement overall is through us. And then we have a power purchase agreement with every off-taker.
With every,
Off-taker, sorry, that's kind of community, I mean, solar speak for like everyone who's
subscriber?
getting their, yes,
Okay.
Yeah, and that would be the co-op itself would be the primary one, would they? And then 100 individual households, low-income households. Is that
correct. And our model is to make each of those households a member of the co-op.
Right.
So then they also have a voice in whatever we do next.
A low-income household, can they sign a 25-year power purchase agreement? They are very confidently.
Okay, so no, what their power purchase agreement is, so Eversource only allows you
Sorry,
to.
can you define power purchase agreement?
It's a legal form that you sign that says you are going to pay for the power that this solar, you're going to pay for the electricity that this array generates.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Some portion of it.
Right.
Yeah, your share of it. Okay.
And
Right.
then there's terms
And
in
then-
terms of
and
how
then-
much
and-
and how long.
Right. So with Eversource, you can only change solar subscribers every 6 months. I mean, in Con Ed, you can change it every 30 days, but with Eversource, it's every 6 months. So basically, if these solar subscribers are unhappy with getting 15% off their solar generation or whatever, they can, they have to pay for that 6 months wherever they fall within. They have to pay, but then they could potentially opt out after 6 months. And it might not be, it's just it's within our cycle of every 6 months. So, so they sign an agreement that says, and we try very hard looking at their old electric bill to match the generation as closely as possible to their usage. So the downside is if ever they are significantly using less electricity than the generation, and that only really happens in the summertime. So it might happen that they prepay for electricity that then in the fall or winter, they have that bank. Does that make sense?
So is that definitional enough for you right now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And
So-
then Co-op Power has the bigger power purchase agreement. We collect the money owed, and then that's how we pay off the array to start with, is through the generation over time.
So you borrowed the capital. At this point, you've got the debt. Okay. Yeah.
Right.
How big? can you say, do you know how much the 960, sorry, the 930 kilowatt system cost? The
I
whole-
do indeed. I mean, because we're currently over budget. I mean, just because we built this in the pandemic and the solar market is crazy right now, both in terms of insurance, but also, I don't know if you're aware, solar panels are like skyrocketing because of the tariff. It's just a crazy time to be doing solar development. So this project is $3.5 million. And right now, that is a little more than the array is going to generate. So we're a little bit underwater on this one. We're actually looking for grants and member equity, members who will come in and contribute to this project so that that's not the case. We're close, but we are a little bit underwater with this project.
Do you know, did the utility require much upgrade of their local equipment? Did your project have to pay for any EverSource upgrade?
No, because EverSource is so needing good public relations right now because of the excuse the French shitstorm they've created for themselves.
Oh, yeah.
That they actually gave us a $0 interconnection agreement, which is basically unheard of. But this is a very, high profile, really important project for the region. And so they've actually, we also have a really good advocate working for us with EverSource, and he seems quite effective in reminding them that they want to be front and center. And so we've actually, so far, because we don't have PTO, which is the power to operate, which is the last step, which I've heard sometimes EverSource can hold you up. The utility can mess with you at any point, right? But so far, they've been really good to work with.
Should we stop asking questions so we can proceed?
Okay, and I can ask plenty of questions at the end. I just also wanted to let you know that, again, as part of the cooperative movement, we worked with a great local worker cooperative, PV Squared, and they're the EPC. I don't know if you've heard that term yet, but Co-op Power tends to do the community development aspect, the education, the community criteria, and then we bring in trusted solar installers. But we also continue to manage and be the kind of guide or community advocate while the build happens. And then depending on what the community wants, we've also continued to work as operations and maintenance and a solar subscription management. So we kind of oversee the whole process and support the CECs depending, like a lot of CECs are doing member outreach, want the solar subscribers to be members. So then it was kind of a natural for us to say in the solar subscription management process, because they're also our co-op members. And we've also, just to let you know, we've also done some very small, much smaller arrays. So this is one where 4 families wanted to go solar and had, a little piece on their property. So we helped them put together financing for a small 25 kilowatt array as well. And they're kind of paying that off through time. So it's not like we only do like super large. Well, probably none of our projects are super large compared to like people who are like bringing in enormous arrays and taking out forests. But we also do less, the River Valley Co-op one is almost a megawatt, and this is 25K. And I just kind of wanted to kind of make a clear distinction between a capitalist approach to solar development and a cooperative approach to solar development. So if you start in the upper left corner, a lot of the large solar companies that come in have a professional sales force, and they can take losses, and so they can usually take a lot of risks in the development process. They are doing very large megawatts of power because that's what the tax equity investors and the Department of Energy loans favor right now. So unfortunately, and I've been talking to people at the federal level about this in terms of the Justice 40 initiative, which is committed to including social justice along with renewable energy. But right now, the incentives are such that the bigger the better to attract tax equity investors and to get low rates of capital on the DOE loans. They're doing development by talking about megawatts of power, and my argument has been like, no, you have to think about community development, not just how many megawatts, how fast. So they also have the capacity to extract profit both from the community in the generation of large arrays and also through environmental extraction, because a lot of those big arrays are doing enormous environmental damage. And they often leave the liability for that with the town. And then, as we talked about earlier, then the profit goes sometimes out of state, even though the incentives are paid by ratepayer incentives, sometimes out of the country entirely. The cooperative approach to solar development is first through community engagement, education, community criteria development, and co-learning within the various CECs. So as each CEC develops a project, we have them meeting with each other so that they can really be a co-learning network. And so they, really becomes like a understanding how energy systems work and why a cooperative approach matters. We access bigger financing than we are through the People Solar Energy Fund, which is again, a national group of cooperatives coming together. So we can we bundle projects together so we have more megawatts of power, even though at the local level, we're not such a big corporation. So we're using aggregation at the national level through the People Solar Energy Fund to put together tax equity financing. And also right now we're trying to see if we can aggregate for insurance, because insurance has been really going up during the pandemic and has stayed up. And then we really look at and deal with what would really empower the community here. What are the other community criteria? We finished a project last year in New York City where workforce development really mattered to the local CEC. So we put solar on 40 low-income buildings in New York City, and we did a bunch of job training at the same time. So that several people, I think maybe 10 people who took that training are now working within the solar development business. So you can think about it in terms of energy resilience. We put some pretty big batteries on that River Valley Co-op project because they were really interested in being a resilience hub, meaning we're building the capacity so if the grid goes down, they could be a place where people could come to get power or heat or whatever they would need. So some of our CCs are really interested in being like a resilience hub. And then the way we do financing is called a tax equity flip. So we bring in tax equity because tax equity allows you to reduce the cost of your solar array by 26% right now, kind of immediately. And then generation pays out that tax equity partner over the next 7 years. And then the local community energy co-op can buy back that solar array between year 7 and 10 for about 10% of its original cost. So that's how we, and then the generation that happens after that belongs to the CEC and the community.
Mary Ann, can I interrupt for a sec?
Yeah,
Just
that was a lot. I'm sorry.
No. It actually wasn't a question. It was, so I think yesterday I sent out this grid about solar ownership, and the middle column is about the flip. So if after this you want to look at it, it sort of breaks out the different components. So, but sorry to interrupt, Mary Ann.
Yep. So yeah, so that's how that's how we're financing projects in a way that's kind of bigger than we are, by aggregating projects across the cooperative projects across the country to attract tax equity partners, get that 26% discount, and then still have it flip back so that communities own the generation after about 10 years. Gail.
Two questions. How do you, if you were to look at Shutesbury, for instance, how would you locate a place or places where solar arrays, I mean, we're not in New York City where you've got rooftops just abutted to each other that you can smack panels on. And the other question is then how do you get subscribers to be, how do you get your co-op members who are going to buy into this, who are going to subscribe to this, who are going to be owners?
I think I just have one more slide, Gail, and so can I just finish this and then
Yeah, sure,
those
sorry.
those are good questions, and big questions. So just to kind of give you this again, sort of a sense of our model. So we're grassroots, local CEC criteria and governance, so very community led in our approach to solar development. We try to aggregate legal, kind of development help at the common office level, which is currently in Florence, Massachusetts. Then we aggregate nationally for things that we need, like tax equity and financing. And then we're also committed to a larger cooperative economic movement, and community wealth building. So I think the only thing else I have on here is, please be in touch if you know somebody who is an Eversource customer who is low income, or even if they don't know their income, but they qualify for Mass Health or SNAP or any other social program. They do qualify, and we are looking for those 100 solar subscribers right now. So you have my email, so just be in touch because I'm very involved in getting that done right now. Okay, I can stop share.
Sure.
All right, now I'm open to questions.
Gail, you want to, I guess, Mary Ann, you want to pick up Gail's and then we can go from there?
Yeah, Gail, can you give me one at a time?
Yeah, what you've described so far is on-site panels at the parking lot or in these buildings in New York. But my guess is that folks in town who have memberships, subscriptions to your co-op, those panels are somewhere else. They're not here.
Well, we are looking to do community solar projects. So mostly we're siting on, like I said earlier, churches, schools, parking lots, anywhere where there's a significantly sizable roof. I live at Sirius. So we also, have beginning a process with Sirius that might be on like a small chunk of land. But we don't generally do like the super big megawatts of
No,
power.
right,
Okay.
yeah.
But yeah, we do focus on built environment, or, potentially along Mass Pike, or potentially along places in which there's land that's not being used for other purpose.
And then how do you recruit your subscribers?
Yeah, that's been really interesting because it seems like I'm only learning this the hard way, that when energy generation started to diversify back in 2016, that there were a lot of scams that people went into low income communities and got them saying like, oh, we'll deduct 10 to 15% off your electric bill, which is exactly what we've been saying. But
Yeah.
I'm learning through community so basically we work through community partners who have the trust in those communities. So we're now working through several community partners in Springfield so that we can explain like, no, we're real. This is a real thing. This builds community wealth. You become a member of this organization. You can help us decide where our next array is going. So that's how we work with community partners in that space, because we really need to rebuild trust. There's just been a lot of damage done.
But
think-
but you have a limited capacity. I mean, you know the capacity that you have available to subscribe. So,
I think, Gail, if it was like Shutesbury, we do what we did with, the fiber network, which is that there was presentations and outreach and we had a good product. So, I mean, I think it'd be a similar pathway.
if you make it, they will come.
Well,
If you make
we
it
also,
good.
Yeah.
yes. Well, we also provide, I mean, again, we look for good community partners and people with missions we support. And so
Yeah.
right now in Springfield, we're offering a $50 incentive to those community. I mean, every qualified subscriber that signs up, they get $50 for. So, if one group goes after it and gets 100 of them, that's like a good, chunk of change that then supports their work, which we feel great about.
And what does qualified mean?
Well, they have to be low for this array. This is not true of every, but for this array, we are getting, there's an additional solar incentive for low income. So in this array, they have to be either an R2 ratepayer, which is Eversource's way of low income, right? Or if they're not currently an R2 ratepayer, but think they qualify, they can send us confirmation that they're on Mass Health, or they're on SNAP, or they're in an environmental justice community. And in certain communities, you qualify even if you're not low income.
And Shutesbury doesn't have any, so.
Okay, but
Leslie.
you don't have to do a low income array either.
Right.
We have plenty of other arrays that are not entirely low income, and they're a mix, or that's where the community criteria comes
Right.
in, because you want it to serve the people in your community.
One of the things that we've been getting,
Eh,
where we've got an energy survey going and getting amazing answers to things, but over and over, the request to help us with incentives or help us to lower costs to install solar on our rooftops. And totally regardless of income. I mean, this is not a plea for low income. It's just generally people want rooftop solar or community solar. There's a real desire in Shutesbury, according to these survey responses, for community solar.
And are they saying help us to know how, or help us to finance, or
Finance.
both? Finance. Okay, so everybody's struggling to finance that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna move on to Leslie and then Graham.
Yeah.
And then we'll circle back if we need to.
Sorry, thank you.
That's all right.
Okay. Marianne, I remember back, I think it was in April or maybe early May, there were some grants for community solar. We didn't think we had enough time with the town meeting and other business, our select board and town administrator were involved in. But are there any grants, for instance, like our elementary school needs a new school roof? Are there grants where we could potentially tie in a new school roof, put solar on there, put it in the parking lot, maybe put it on other buildings that are in town, or I think you've mentioned serious community might, can we piece it together? Maybe some arrays like along 202 in Shutesbury, or does it all have to be in Shutesbury for a grant?
So that original grant I think I was talking to you about, Leslie, was for the rural electrification pilot project.
Mhm.
CoPower ended up partnering with UMass CEC about that, because personally, I wish, we're just coming out of the pandemic too. I wish if I had endless money right now, the first thing I would do would be hire somebody to be searching for those grants, because I think it's a great time for those. We're looking at ways, if like when someone needs to put on a new roof, that's an ideal time to see if you could financially bundle that with solar development. So we are actually exploring that. The Boston CEC is putting a lot of effort into exploring that right now. So the short of it was that UMass CEC did not choose Shutesbury as one of its towns. I guess it really went with low income, or maybe where they already had partnerships, or I mean, I made a plea for Shutesbury because I also live in Shutesbury, but
Mhm.
that was not one of the towns that ended up being chosen. But that said, I, my gut tells me that there, through ARPA and through infrastructure bills, that there is money coming for what you just talked about, Leslie.
Okay,
But
great.
I'm also in like the research aspect of that, and Co-op Power is small staffed right now. We're, seeking grants. We just are in the process, I think, of getting a grant to build our staff capacity so we can really kind of rebirth our CECs, a lot of which went into a sort of state of dormancy during the pandemic as well. But so, you know, I think it's a good time to be looking for those grants at both the state, federal, local levels.
That's encouraging because I know that, certain corporate entities are taking the smart money or thinking they can, and that doesn't seem to be a good gatekeeper for projects like this that really help communities grow and prosper, and as well as have renewable energy, which I
Yeah,
think
and
was
we
what.
advocating for that at both the federal and state level. Like this is, if you really want to be doing environmental justice work, it's not the way it's currently being incentivized.
Thank you for that point.
Graham,
Oh yeah, just I guess the obvious thing, and Marianne, I guess because you live in Shutesbury, but there aren't many places that are leaping out as obvious contenders for open land to put any race on. And the other one is, even though a lot of us would like stuff on our roofs, my house is fairly well oriented, but I had to do $10,000, more than $10,000 worth of tree work to get the shade off of my roof. So that applies to a lot of people in
Yeah.
Shutesbury, I think.
Yeah, my neighbor just took down all of his trees to put
Wow.
in solar. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's not a perfect world, right? But, and I mean, I'm sure we've done projects where we've had to take down some trees, but our model is not to clear cut forests to put in megawatts of power that then, for me, is community extraction, basically, not
so,
community ownership.
so Marianne, can I follow up on that? Because
Yep.
I mean, just in looking at the limitations of land availability in Shutesbury, I think it was our last meeting, we talked about, is there land outside of Shutesbury? And so,
Yeah.
So I guess there's two questions. My first one is there a way of structuring it so that one could find, built environment or brownfield locations that, we could feel good about, but then have some kind of power purchase agreement for, either a group of residents or, through the MLP or through the town, or somehow, arrange for the power generated somewhere else to sort of be credited to Shutesbury. I'm not even sure how
Yeah.
that would work.
No, I mean, that could totally work. I mean, to think about it in terms of community solar, it's more useful to think about it in terms of utility territory. So I think all of Shutesbury is National Grid. Is that right? I mean, I know. Okay.
95%.
Okay. So then really you're just thinking about where could we potentially build in National Grid territory and then focus your solar subscription development in Shutesbury. If there was like a locally based like CEC, or
Well, that was my second.
Or you could also think of a couple other towns that you want to come together with and have your CEC. Like right now, we're doing it kind of at the county level, but that's not necessarily the best way to think about it. I actually do think in terms of it, like utility is probably a better way to think about it.
The follow-up question was just sort of like, what's the entity? So, like for broadband, there was close to a decade of discussion about what's the entity that can do business. So at the point where communities in Western Mass were looking to do it regionally, and Wired West was this entity. And so they looked at co-ops as a possibility, and it didn't make sense. And they looked at a couple of different, because towns are designed to be freestanding. Towns don't play with each
Yeah.
other. You have to create another thing of
Right.
which they're part of. So if in any of these kind of models, is it a matter of creating, like some of the reading that I did, having an entity that has to pay taxes benefits from the tax credit where a municipality would not, and then we have an existing MLP, which does broadband, but it could be for power conceivably. So based on what like, is there a preferred entity that would be that place where subscribers would come and that a power purchase agreement would be made with?
Well, we are just starting to experiment with municipal ownership. So there is a potential that the town could buy the project back. We haven't done a lot in that space. And I guess, but we are experimenting in that space in another CEC. I guess I just want to make sure that it represents a cooperative movement and not, just like we're taking all the risk and then the town gets it. That's my concern. I mean, the reason we're committed to a cooperative movement is because we want that some of that generation to flow back so co-op power stays viable too. We can't just give stuff away. So we're still figuring out, there might be a way to do it with municipal, but then we might need to sell it back for more, right? We need to kind of just figure out the financing of how that would work.
The benefit to having the municipal involved in financing is obviously we get better rates on borrowing bonds and stuff. So we have that
Right,
leverage.
right. And that rate might be better than what we can come up with. So that's another reason that I think it's very useful to explore that from your perspective. And I'm just kind of being honest about where, like Co-op Powers has tended to overpromise in the past. And so as their new manager, I'm like, yes, okay, we'll help you as much as we can, but we can't lose money in the process. It just doesn't support the cooperative movement. So does that kind of answer your question, Michael? We're quite interested. I mean, every project has been its own creative adventure in terms of financing, and there's still a lot that we're pretty young and figuring out in this, and the solar development space has completely changes like almost every year so far. So we're willing to really try to help, but then there's also a point when we're like, okay, there needs to be some money flowing in as well in the process.
Yeah.
Leslie.
Yeah. And I just want to point out it's 8 o'clock, so we should sort of almost wrap up, but go ahead for it, Leslie.
Yeah, I just wanted to better understand, like I joined Co-op Power and I'm enjoying 15% off on my bill. I don't know exactly, living in Shutesbury, where the solar that's feeding my National Grid account comes from, but
I think it's in the Berkshires.
Okay, thank you.
So just to show that it doesn't, it's a National Grid array, but it doesn't need to be in your town at the community solar level.
Right, and that is in the Berkshires, but it was like on some brownfield or parking lot or rooftop. It wasn't like okay. So let's say Shutesbury eventually went this way, who knows? Would I then, because I'm in Shutesbury, switch over to the Shutesbury Community Solar, or is this like just a hypothetical?
Well, I
scenario.
mean, it depends on your goals because a lot of towns are thinking about the resilience hub approach. So, do you want something on the school so that the school, if the grid goes down, the school could have battery backup. So if it was a winter day, the community would have someplace to go to stay warm or charge their batteries. I mean, like that, the haunting
Right,
story of Texas kind of is, I think, for at least for people thinking about energy systems.
right.
So I don't know how many of you had a chance to read that Alan Weinrub article but I personally think from a regenerative design perspective that, towns should be thinking about resilience hubs and microgrids. And that's, I think, more of a true energy democracy approach, even than the big community solar, feeding back into the grid. So it all depends on, I mean, we're talking to a group in Maine now that's talking about creating a public utility because the investor-owned utilities are just outrageous right now. So, we're kind of following a bunch of movements and supporting those communities where they're wanting to go.
Zoe?
I'm just curious about the resilience hub concept and if that requires a battery. And
Yeah.
I've just heard mixed things about where the technology around batteries is at and their safety. And I wanted to hear your opinion on the batteries.
Yeah, it's innovating really quickly is all I can say. So River Valley Co-op has a zinc ion batteries rather than lithium, and it felt like that company EOS was making a step in the right direction. So, and we actually got a construction loan for them because they really were just establishing themselves in the marketplace. Um, so it worked as a win-win for us to bring in like a new innovative battery that's environmentally better. I know at someone just connected me to someone at UMass who is working on one that's even better environmentally. And so if you're interested, just send me an email and I'll try to connect you to them. All I could say is like, yes, it's definitely not environmentally great, but at the same time, there's, I think, a lot of people working on that space right now.
Yeah, it was interesting. I did a webinar on microgrids last week, which I sent some stuff from, and I asked the developers about that, Zoe. And I was surprised because these are all, they develop solar and microgrids, and they all said that if you're thinking about lithium ion batteries, that is problematic,
Yeah.
and the other technologies are coming along, but, they didn't shy away from the fact that, the concept of storing energy makes sense. It's just the technology is poor. So if you get a good technology that's less volatile and less, environmentally, whether it's the mining or the fires, lithium's got the issues. But if they can come up with a good technology for storing, and there are other.
I mean, pumping water uphill seems to be like maybe the most environmentally best solution if you can figure out how to, if you're in a space where that works for the site and you can do it.
Northfield Mountain has that.
Oh, do they?
Water. Yeah.
They do
Oh, cool.
indeed.
Yeah. Low tech. So,
yeah, I mean, I honestly feel like some of those low tech solutions are amazingly elegant, and that I think is one of them for just storing energy.
Takes up a lot of room, though.
It does.
Dale, you want to have the last question?
How is what you've described different from microchip?
Microgrids.
Microgrid, sorry.
How is what that I described?
Maybe I just need to ask, what is microgrid?
Okay, so microgrid means that you have the capacity, and this does involve like spending money on the grid, right? So you have the capacity to, if the grid goes down, for you to like kind of separate yourself from the grid as an island. And if you have energy storage, your town or your group of houses continues to enjoy that solar generation and it's not feeding into the grid anymore.
Like traditionally, Gail, from what I got from the webinar is like, if you think about a campus or, you know, a corporate production facility, they might have generation on site and storage, and then they're using different kinds of energy. And it could be wind, it could be solar, it could be, you know, fossil fuel based, but it's all, it could feed the grid, but it can also disconnect.
Accessory.
Right, because right now, if you do a traditional community solar approach and it's feeding into the grid and the grid goes down, you
You're
got
gone.
nothing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So a microgrid might be your whole street, for instance, you know, street by street, you might grid off and you just have enough generation to carry that street and enough battery power to keep the street going if you lost the utilities.
Or and like if you're doing it like on a school, that it's a resilience hub, so it at least has the capacity that if the grid goes down, people know they can come there to get electricity, right? So it's, you know, it's a grid of its own. That's why it's kind of called a resilience hub. It's not really feeding to anybody's house, but it is a place in when people are really cold or desperate that they could come.
And the new library is building this soon.
Yeah, I think in terms of like our recommendations, you know, this might be one of those values that we, you know, discussed. Do we want to incorporate this as part of a proposal? It's resilience is, you know, in addition to generation. But I should wrap us up just so we can continue on. But Marianne, this has been great. Thank you again. We might invite you back at some point when we're more mature with more questions.
Oh, please, what you're doing is near and dear to my heart. The only reason I didn't kind of apply to be on this committee was just because I'm working for Co-op Power, and it just seemed like it might be seen as a conflict of interest. So,
Might.
but
Cool. Well, thank you. So is
Yep.
everyone good if we segue over to updates?
Excellent. Excellent.
okay, be well.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
You too. Stay safe.
Thanks for your work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So why don't we can follow up on this discussion, maybe process it and then sort of put it on the agenda for our next meeting if there's any other stuff. But if we shift to updates, there's 3 that I've got on the agenda. If I missed anything, we can incorporate it. But Gail, you want to kick us off and talk about the fuel survey?
Yeah, at this point, we have 139 out of 844 household responding. It is very clear that the prompts and the reminders, the announcement at town meeting had everything to do with people signing up. So we had set originally June 6th, which would be next weekend, as the last chance. And I'm wondering if you think it would be helpful to go another week. I mean, there's no hurry really to get results toward anything. And as long as we get reminders, people responding to the reminders, I'd like to keep at it for a while, if that's
It makes sense to me.
Good
okay.
idea.
1 week, 2 weeks.
We'll go 1 week at a time and see what happens.
Okay, yeah, there's
It's
no,
kinda
we don't
like-
need to put it, yeah,
It kind
cool,
of like
all right.
you run
I'll
a
do that.
sale and then you don't sell enough, they always extend the sale, you know.
Okay.
Yes.
So I'll send out next door Shutesbury and town announcement. Can you think of any other place that we can,
The e-cricket,
who has credit availability, access to? credit?
I'm on it.
Okay,
So if you want to send me your updated blurb, I can post on it.
okay,
And I think, you know, it'd be interesting, Gail, if, I don't know if you can do this through the web committee or if Becky can, but just sending out an email to the different committees. I know Becky's got a list of the board, the different committees and boards. Because I think just reminding them that, you know, those tend to be more active people in town. If we can make sure that they're doing it too.
what do you mean, get board members to sign up?
Yeah, to fulfill it, you know, so it doesn't have to be energy related, but, you know, the water supply committee should be making sure that they fill it out. That kind of stuff. And open space and recreation, which I think you're on, right? So, yeah, so just remind, Becky's got an email list in terms of your question about who else and how to get it out there.
yeah, and I wonder if Becky, you know, because sometimes she'll do this mass phone thing, like if the street is going to be worked on or something, if that might be an appropriate announcement to just leave messages for people.
I don't think so. It's got to go through the like fire department and, or it's, I mean, that's,
But I have a list of all the organizational emails. So all the committees, boards, commissions.
oh, so you sent it out already?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's good. No, I
And
think
just
let's
send it-
talking about the
send the
phone thing.
same blurb to those
Yeah,
emails.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Leslie was talking about the reverse 911 thing that Walter usually is the
Right.
voice for, and I think
mean-
that's
It's not a real emergency.
no.
Not quite yet.
So Gail, aside from what you mentioned when Marianne was talking, is there any other high-level themes that are worth sharing at this point that are striking you?
Sid?
Are there any themes from what you've seen
Oh,
besides?
solar.
Yeah,
Oh, solar. And lots of interest in community solar. And there's, again, not any distinction, as Mary Ann mentioned, what does community solar mean to that person who asks for it? But clearly, so reduce electric rates that will benefit everybody in town. And to make more efficient any of the energy in the town buildings. That has come up over and over again. So that leads us back to where we started with getting a renewed energy audit on all the town buildings and just going for the green community add-ons.
well, thank you for taking the lead on this.
Yeah.
This is huge.
And information on the school. The school is very heavily shaded and is not a good place for solar panels, which is part of why they have a teeny tiny 2 kilowatt thing. And the perimeter of the school is so close. The trees that are shading it are outside the school property. So it's not even a decision could be made to cut down trees to put sunlight on the roof. So the school roof is basically out for solar.
I've heard different opinions from other people in town. What about the school parking lot?
Wide open.
Mhm.
But as Mary Ann points out, that's very expensive.
Yeah. Her project was $3.5 million for a little under 1 megawatt. So that's $4 a watt. And we know you can get ground-based for
Panels.
$1, well, a year or two ago. So that it's a high price to pay.
Apparently, the earlier energy committee did a thorough search through town. Where is there land appropriate to place solar? And they looked at buildings and they looked at ground. And they came up with really lot 032. Because of the width, for one thing. And the area behind town hall is long, but shallow wide.
Yeah.
So
Penny Jakes had told me that just very recently that the back part of 032 behind where the library hopefully will be.
Yep.
So the last thing on the fuel survey, once we close it, when that is, will you be able to sort of write stuff up and then maybe we can present to the select board as well as to each other, just sort of, from
yeah,
the
sure.
spreadsheet?
I mean, we're going to present results to the town.
Yeah.
It's going to take some work because I'm learning now that, for instance, when we asked about energy sources at home for heating, what shows up on the spreadsheet is all the varieties. It doesn't say that house A has 3 sources of heat power, that house number 2 has only 1, that, so how to read that is going to be a little tricky, but we'll get there.
This is impressive in terms of gathering information. So thank you. Whoever suggested it, good idea.
Thanks for taking it on, Gail. I filled it out today and I noticed, like, I have electric baseboard backup that I never use unless I'm away. And there wasn't, I mean, the survey is very general. So, if I was traveling and teaching pre-COVID, then I would kick that on and hope we didn't have a power outage in February.
But that's a good one. That we coulda, woulda, shoulda asked, what is your primary source? What is your
Right.
backup?
Right.
Or do you have a summer versus winter? I mean, we could have cut it a whole bunch of finer ways.
Sure.
And next
Sure.
time around,
Yeah, well, that's the nature of the beast, the first child and then the second child, you do it differently.
So Nate, you want to give us an update on aggregation?
Sure. Let me fire this up. Can everyone see this?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. All right. Well, this is an update, and it's also, I think, part of my process of learning about community choice aggregation. So it's a little bit of a blend of an update, and then I think some key concepts that I'm coming across as I read deeper into the subject. So I'll try to keep it to about 5 minutes, but
Right, you can go, you can go a little longer, that's okay.
okay,
We're gonna go over, so
Yeah,
just forewarned.
okay.
do it well, yeah.
Much appreciated. So yeah, here I just wanted to reinforce that many other communities in Massachusetts see the value in community choice aggregation. This is a list of communities with approved CCAs. So these are already in operation currently. Let's see. So most of those CCAs, they are based in a market aggregation model, which means that a broker does a lot of the heavy lifting in developing the plan and identifying an electricity supplier. So for that work, they extract a fee which is rolled into your bill. So you don't actually see the fraction of a cent per kilowatt hour that they get paid for doing that work. The alternative is what Cape Light Compact did and what Amherst Pelham Northampton is working on currently, which requires setting up a nonprofit that's called a joint powers entity. And that organization can fill the role of the broker, basically. It's much more complicated, but it creates a revenue stream that the nonprofit can then use to fund renewable energy projects throughout the community. So I think when I presented in April on CCA, I talked about how Cape Light had used that funding revenue stream to support putting solar panels on all the schools in the participating communities. So these steps, 1 through 11, outline a typical market aggregation path, so the more common model. But public aggregation would be similar, with the joint powers entity filling the role of the broker here. So we're currently in step 1. We're doing research. The guide to municipal aggregation suggests doing a feasibility study, but it's not strictly required. And the DOER recommends getting in touch with them as early in the process as you can. So steps 2 and 3 allow a town to formally do work with a broker, right? So you draft your warrant article, it gets voted on at a town meeting, and then you're actively fielding requests for proposals from energy brokers. And through that RFP process, you get a lot of the information that you would have gotten in the feasibility study section. Right. So with an energy broker selected, you then they help you put together your aggregation plan, which is put before the select board for approval. And then with an approved plan, it goes to the Department of Public Utilities. And DPU can have it for quite a while. So it's probably the longest step in the process. It can be a year, it can be less than a year, but that is a kind of a key inflection point in the process once it goes to DPU. it isn't really until step 8 that you're making choices among suppliers, and then you're able to get really specific about rates and the exact set of renewable energy proportions that you are allocating among the different plan options that you're presenting to the community. And then once that gels, you sign a contract for a fixed period of time. And then everyone in the town is notified. And you can do that. You would do that by mail, but also electronically as well, I think. So, and then people are enrolled, and it takes off at that point. So this is a more thorough, like step-by-step than we sort of talked about before. So I just kind of wanted to put all that out there as an abstracted step-by-step for setting up a CCA. So now this is more like the update section. So what I've done so far. So I did reach out to DOER via Green Communities, and I met Mark Rubinski, and I learned that the Guide to Municipal Electric Aggregation, there's an update that's currently in review, and hopefully will become available soon, because I assume that they've learned quite a few things since the Patrick administration, which is when the last guide was put together.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, CCA has been around for a while in principle. And I was just really surprised to learn that it was a thing that had been around for so long. But Mark also sent to us the town of Windsor's plan. And I put that in our shared folder under CCA. And I think if you take a look at that, it'll be really helpful, because you'll see that it was drafted by a broker, and you'll see everything that sort of goes into the proposal that the broker is supposed to put together through this process.
Cool.
I also just cold called a couple of different brokers. So of the approved CCAs on the state website, most of them were either with Good Energy, Mass Power Choice, which is part of Peregrine Energy, and then Colonial Power Group, which appears to mostly service Western Massachusetts. And Colonial Power Group, they called me back within like 5 minutes, basically, of the query. And they offered to come and meet us. They're happy to talk to us at any time. And in our shared CCA folder, they provided an illustrative timeline that's specific to the town of Shutesbury. But I would say if you take a look at that, you disregard the dates, except as spacers for kind of like how long things take. But they did provide that illustrative timeline. And then another thing that I wanted to share with the committee is just a set of templates for what an authorizing article could look like. So within the Amherst Pelham Northampton project report that I placed in the shared drive, there are authorizing vote articles from each of the towns. So you can kind of see how they set up the issue. They're all kind of one-pager things, but they basically allow the town to begin that formal set of work with a broker. And then finally, I was thinking about our conversations and sort of Shutesbury values, and how we might articulate some of these that might actually like get rolled into an authorizing set of articles. But, clearly there are ways of doing this that would be suboptimal. And so I just was trying to like put to paper, what some of the things are that we would not want to lose track of, as the conversation moves forward. So that's my update on CCA for this meeting.
Great work.
Wow.
Any
Mhm.
questions? Nate, you're such a slacker.
Where do we go from here?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, like leading off with that distinction between the public aggregation and the market aggregation, I think is pretty key. I think that one of the issues with joining an existing, say the Amherst, Pelham, Northampton, say you wanted to go with a model that is generating revenue for the participants that can then be rolled into renewable energy projects, weatherizing buildings, putting up solar arrays, and whatnot. I actually think in either case, there's like a lawyer involved somewhere, right? And I'm not sure how the town, handles those sorts of like high level intercommunity agreements, but it was clear to me that there's a lot more work in that approach, but it seems like they've done a lot of it already, right? So for next steps, I think like which path are we thinking makes more is better to like prioritize to pursue. I guess there are the three choices of not moving forward with community choice aggregation, going with a market-based kind of the most common model for doing it, and then like reaching for something more in a something that would require joining a joint powers like nonprofit entity that would then have undoubtedly like more work associated with it. I think maybe a more complicated path, but it might be more rewarding as well.
If I make a suggestion, I'm thinking maybe next meeting, we can sort of have like a discussion, brainstorm kind of for most of it, because I think we can talk about aggregation and all the discussions there. We can sort of process the community solar component and the variations on what that might be. Because it seems like we got a bunch of information, but if we just cut out, put aside the time to actually discuss it, that might be helpful. We can just sort of share ideas. Does that make sense? Yeah.
But if we decide to go market or town, we still have to aggregate as a town first, right?
So I think it's an early decision because the question is, do you go through the aggregation with a broker, or do you do it through a nonprofit that you've set up to fulfill that goal? So I think a lot of the work is downstream of that
decision.
decision. I think so. Yeah.
And so that's the thing, it's like we can have that discussion, and then and pros and cons, and then we can sort of have the subsequent discussions, and we can sort of talk about within the community solar, like if there's stuff as we thought about it, whether it's land or just some of the stuff that Mary Ann raised. So that's what I'm thinking. And just because it's 8:30, and I want to make sure we get through the rest of the stuff without getting too far beyond, if that makes sense.
Lots to think about.
Yeah. So Zoe, I'm sorry,
one-
Leslie. Yeah.
Again, I appreciate, Nate, all the clarity and the slides, especially because I'm taking minutes and trying to scribble as fast as I can, but I'm not sure I understand the difference between the market and the the nonprofit. Is the market mean like through a broker?
That's right.
Okay,
Yeah, that's right. So
They make profit. It's a business model. So
Yeah.
the broker's making profit and it doesn't go back to the community, where the nonprofit is, if not to the community, it's just mission driven.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Yeah.
then the community has to do all the work.
Yeah.
Right. Okay,
Yeah.
thank
And the whole question of what would constitute a nonprofit entity,
Yes.
because they're
and,
going to be, I'm sure there are legal rules and regulations on what counts and what doesn't.
yeah, so I think,
Responsibilities and possibilities of actions, depending on what your choices are.
and that's why it's really helpful to have the Amherst, Pelham, Northampton documentation, because they authorize a joint powers agreement that then birthed a joint powers entity. And then that's the nonprofit group that that then is doing the work that a broker otherwise would have. In addition to, I would understand making some of the governance decisions about that money flow, that set of, all the operations there. So that sounds like staff to me, and it sounds like some amount of work there.
So it's individuals that sign up for that or that get collared for that? Well, I learned that from reading their paper.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But let's move on just so we can do it. So Zoe, in terms of the skills inventory, you making any progress or you want to report on?
I'm gonna meet with Mary Ann on Tuesday and talk to her about that. So no new updates as of right now. And if anyone has anything that they want me to bring to Mary Ann for that conversation, let me know.
What do you mean by skills update?
So we talked last meeting about developing an inventory of skills for people in town who could offer, it's sort of the stuff that you talked about, sort of
Okay.
lifestyle decisions, whether it's sustainability or conservation or self-reliance, that kind of stuff. Am I summarizing that correctly, Zoe?
Yeah, a list of people, and also
Okay.
the
Right.
idea of like a series of gatherings, whether it be in person or on Zoom, to get people educated,
Mhm.
workshops or Q&A.
Mhm.
Cool. Great. Well, we look forward to the update and thank you for the time saving. Finish up.
Yeah.
So Nate, up to you again. Do you have another PowerPoint?
I sure do.
We like it.
It's really long too, sorry. So yeah, thank you for the floor. So last week, Michael, you'd solicited ideas for future areas of committee work, and I thought it might be helpful to take a look at the municipal vulnerability plan and the hazard mitigation plan, since they're loaded with ideas, and they also, the select board is kind of looking to us for recommendations on how to meet some of these, some of the goals that are in the reports. And we also need to report to the select board on a quarterly basis, I think.
They don't know that. They don't remember that part.
Yeah.
It's in the charge.
Yeah, I know.
So I went through these documents, and I tried to zero in on priorities that have a clear energy related component, but there are so many ideas in these reports that this reading is by no means comprehensive. And I also think that our charge as a committee is very expansive, right? So it's energy and climate action. So this might be a presentation where I'm going to throw a bunch of stuff at you, and then maybe at a future meeting, as we're doing with CCA, we could have like the discussion time, and I'm just going to start with MVP, right? So this is the municipal vulnerability plan, high and moderate priorities that have some energy hook to it. Okay. So first up is municipally owned solar to build resilience and possibly support microgrid capability. So this is very much in line with our conversation about community solar just now. So I'm gonna avoid reading all of these words to you, but I just give enough time for you to kind of get the flavor of what's up here. Another high priority was budget support for climate mitigation and adaptation. So funding streams and at least the beginnings of some thought to how the town can finance some of the things that we'd like to do in this space came up in the plan, for sure, in a couple of different places. Next is writing climate mitigation and adaptation issues into an update of the town's master plan, particularly with regard to zoning considerations. So it would be interesting to know if there's a master plan update underway. I think the current master plan is a little out of date, so maybe Michael can give us an update.
Yeah, well, the only thing I would say about these two is they're really good examples of how we can't do it all and we have to work with other committees. So, with the master plan, since I'm on the planning board, that was something that I recommended in the MVP discussions. And it's been two years of thinking about updating the master plan. And we haven't had the bandwidth because we're waiting for these solar projects to sort of hit us or not. But that's an example where the master plan would be on the planning board to do it. And we could make recommendations to the planning board directly or through the select board. And then with the climate adaptation fund, that's another place where we could recommend it to the finance committee and say, here's a way to think about it. And whether we go to the finance committee and present it, but basically, pull things out, because I would bet no one on the finance committee has read either of these plans. And so to be able to pull it out and lift it up and then have them do the work. So I'm just calling it out as an example, because I think it can easily get overwhelming of like, there's only 7 of us. There's no way we can do this stuff. But our job is to sort of pull things out and then go to other committees whose actual charge is to deal with some of this stuff. So that was my interruption. So you can continue.
No, that's good. And when we get to hazard mitigation, like maybe at our next meeting, that's built upon this set of recommendations. And one of the things that report does is it lists a priority area of work, and it also identifies which boards and committees are kind of on point for those areas. So it'll be super helpful, I think, once we thread through all this material to kind of see how all those things line up, and who we should engage for like these points. So this next one really interested me because it talks about enhanced communication, but it talks about it in the context of how dependent our communication systems are on electricity. So I thought it hit on that resilience theme, and how when the lights go out, our ability to talk to each other is also affected. So that interested me. And then going back to funding for climate related projects, there was a priority to consider commercial development and its impact on forests. And as a possible means of using payment in lieu of taxes pilot to grow a climate mitigation fund. This is the last high priority slide. Self-sufficiency incentives. So this speaks to Zoe's work a bit, I think. So finding ways to help people manage when the grid is down. And then last here, there's a priority to advocate for policies at the state level as an area of work. Okay, now we're at just a couple of moderate priority areas. I added air conditioning as a priority area since it's an opportunity to engage the school on climate related issues. Next is zoning and residential battery use and land clearing for solar. And finally, there's a priority to enhance walkability in the town, integrate green technology in the library redesign, which I understand is very much part of that plan based on all town meeting. And then lastly, adding electric vehicle chargers in public spaces. So those were the ones that jumped out to me on my reading. The priorities are several pages of bullets. There are scores of them, but these are the ones that I thought overlapped best with our mandate. So,
Any questions?
That's great.
Thank you, Nate. This is helpful. I mean, it seems, are you recommending that we do a similar thing on the hazard mitigation next time, and then subsequent to that, we sort of dig into both of them?
I think so, because I have those slides queued up, but I think it's a lot to ask of you.
The anticipation will be worth it.
Totally.
But what's really interesting here is to see how common threads weave all the way through this and what we've been discussing in solar and what will come up in hazard mitigation.
I can foresee, I don't know, somewhere in the next 3 to 6 months, if we do a presentation, whether the select board or we do it sort of more broadly, that, there'll be, these threads will emerge, so we can cite the fuel survey and we can cite the MVP and the hazard mitigation. We can cite some of the research we've done. We can identify the skills inventory and, just map things out so that the recommendations are really, they're grounded in, either local research or external research, but it seems like we're converging on something, which is good. Cool. Nate, thank you for raising this as a way to approach this, because I think it makes a lot of sense.
Excellent.
So I think I'm going to jump over confirming meeting date to sort of flip it a little bit. So in terms of the working with committees, I just put it on there, and it's sort of what I was just saying, that I think somewhere in the next month or two, we might want to think about what our approach is to working with committees, and it might come clear after the MVP and hazard mitigation plan. But some of us are on different committees, so we could be obvious liaisons, but just sort of having a plan of how we do this and whether we go to the select board first and talk to them. But there's different ways we can approach it, but I think just if we put it in the back of our heads and say, there's no way we can do all this by ourselves, and there's other committees that are tasked with this stuff closer to their mission. And so how do we do that, since it is actually part of our charges to work with other committees? So that's my spiel on that. So Gail, I think you have the last substance piece, which is the Google Drive and any other related. You want to just explain what you did so people understand? Or
What's the question?
well, you had organized our Google Drive.
Yeah. One question that comes to mind is the way documents are titled in the resource folder. And I'm wondering, so for instance, for the presentations at these meetings, do you want to see that by title? Do you want to see it by date?
I would vote for title, just because
The
otherwise,
topic?
yeah,
Okay,
because going through dates.
Remembering your dates are hard.
Yeah. Do you want to just back up and tell people how you approached it and what you did? Because I don't know if everyone's jumped into the Google Drive or not, and you're swimming in it.
okay. Maybe this is where I could share,
Sure. Let me see if I.
if I can
Here.
get to my. Sorry, I didn't realize that was on the assignment list.
Well, I'll just fill in while you're doing this. So,
Okay.
Gail and I have been going back and forth about how to make information accessible so that we can use it as resources ongoing, because we're discovering things on our path. And some stuff has to be accessible to the public since we're, a public body, but other things are just, we're sharing amongst ourselves. And so we wanted to come up with a way that was easy so that whether it's a presentation or, some of the documents that Nate just highlighted can live somewhere. And we're not scrolling through emails, and they're easy. And if someone in town wants to know about it, we can easily point them with the URL. So, oh, that was good timing.
So the basic decision that I think is this document, whatever it is, an article that somebody has read and recommended, or somebody has found or presented at a meeting? No, not that one. Is this general information for the public, or is this information for us as a committee? So the kinds of things that are presented at the meetings and the kind of articles from that Michael's put in by UMass and so forth. So this is now the shared folder. You should all have access to this and be able to open any of these folders and get to any of these pieces inside. So this is the one that Nate's putting together for CCA, and here are the things that he's referred to tonight. This is the resource tools, and this is a spreadsheet that Michael started with the source, description, and the URL. But we've added since then, oops, how to get out of here now. Yeah. Specific articles. So here are the MVP and HMP, for instance. Here's some things that I put up from the community solar financing that Michael forwarded earlier today. Here's some items of interest, for instance, Marianne's article, why we need energy justice that she referred to tonight. The wildfire risks that Michael found in a magazine a while back. So these are just more things of interest, not necessarily a topic of committee decision-making. These are things that have been actually presented at the meetings. So they're all going to be PowerPoints.
Wow.
By title. These are resource tools. Help us make decisions on whatever we're going to be doing. And this is particular to the CCA that Nate is putting together.
And I can imagine we can grow this. So like if there's,
Oh, yeah.
So like the skills inventory, for example, we could,
Yeah.
if stuff comes out of that.
Go right in there. Yep.
Yeah. So is this, I think it's pretty helpful to have this, but do people think that this is, we'll just grow this and it's a good resource to be able to access? Cool. Okay.
Yeah.
Gail, thank you for managing it.
Yeah, another one. I have to stop sharing that and are you seeing the?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. So on the committee page,
Wow.
we have the current project, which is the survey, current explorations, and I would invite Nate to help us put together a page on CCA. But here are a whole bunch of energy related topics, which are this reference to the microgrid that was held last week, particular articles on energy production, fossil fuel stuff. But this would be for just folks in town who want to keep up with what we're looking at.
Yeah, can you scroll to the top? Yeah, so the thing to note, Gail and I sort of came up with this little qualifier, which is that just we're differentiating things that we're recommending as a committee versus things
good.
we're sharing as education. So like anything on this page, we're not backing it in any way. I mean, it has to pass some kind of vetting and muster to actually get to it, you know, to get on the page, but it'll be different from something that actually becomes a recommendation that we get behind officially as a committee. So that's why.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so if people have ideas, I think Gail's the point person on this, and if if there's good articles, the idea would be to share it with everybody, and then Gail can just sort of put it where it's supposed to live.
And hopefully engage folks in town with wanting to have access to the information or just to know what we're doing and what kind of things we're looking at.
Gail, when you send out the next reminder or the special extension for the filling in the survey, you might give them the URL to tell them that there are these that this is on our webpage, right? That might be something that someone who's filling in a survey is probably interested in some of this.
Okay.
That's a great idea.
So for those related topics for the tab. Okay.
Yeah, that's great. Cool. So I think the last thing before we wrap up is last meeting we decided to go to every 3-week cycle, and so based on what I saw, that means that would be Tuesday, June 21st would be 3 weeks from now. So does that work for people for 3 weeks from now? Cool.
Yep.
Okay, great. And Zoe graciously is going to do minutes, and we'll go from there. So another good meeting. And I think, what I'm thinking is next meeting, we'll process some of the community solar discussion. We can talk about aggregation, and then we can talk about hazard mitigation. And if there's anything else you all think of in the interim, just shoot me an email and we'll get it on there. But this was terrific.
It is.
Any parting comments before we split up?
This is
Okay.
exciting stuff, you guys. I mean, we're doing things, considering things, future orientation is just solid. Ugh.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Okie dokie. Well, Leslie.
I feel like so much happened and I made a lot of scribbles. So I think I'm going to need some help in terms of minutes. Maybe I'll look at what Miriam sent a while back and just sort of create like a skeleton, because it looks like there's so much more that will be discussed later.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you send it to me and I can look it over. I'd be happy to.
Okay, thanks, Michael.
Sure.
And the minutes don't have to have all the detail.
Yeah, I mean, I
Major
could see
points,
it.
but it's
Yeah,
impossible to duplicate the.
So the
Yeah.
last thing, anyone want to make a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor, Graham,
Aye.
Aye.
Zoe,
Aye.
Nate,
Aye.
Leslie,
Aye.
and I'm an aye. Okay, good night, everybody.
Great
night.
meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, thank you.